Hello everyone, welcome back to Excel English. Today I'm going to show you how you can teach your ESL learners about Australian habitats using a presentation, interactive games, and a reading comprehension activity. These materials can be spread out over several lessons depending on your students' background knowledge, their age, and their English level. I'll walk you step by step through how I teach this unit, from introducing the vocabulary to playing interactive games and finally completing a reading comprehension activity. Let's dive into it. Each lesson starts with a learning intention and success criteria. So, for example, for this lesson, the learning intention is we're learning about Australian habitats and animals that live there. So, by the end of the lesson or a series of lessons, I want my students to be able to define the word habitat, name some Australian habitats, name some animals that live there, and I want them to be able to describe one of the habitats using adjectives. First of all, we will find Australia on the world map. Usually students can do this activity pretty easily. Next, I put up photos of some iconic Australian animals such as kangaroos, koalas, and emus. And I'll ask my students, have you seen these animals? So some of them probably have seen them in a zoo, like a kangaroo. Do you know their names? Where do these animals live? And students might say they live in Australia. And then I will emphasize that some animals live only in Australia. So kangaroos, koalas, and emus live only in Australia. What I like to do in my lessons is to elicit the information from the students. So I ask them a question. What do animals need? And these visuals will help them to answer this question. So animals need food, water, and home. And this is when I will introduce the word habitat. A home is called a habitat. A habitat is home for animals and plants. So I like having visuals to support what I'm saying. So it's like message abundancy for my students, so they don't just hear what I'm saying, but they can also see it. Next, I show a photograph of woodlands and I ask my students, what is this habitat? So they might say, it's a forest. Then I introduce the word woodland or woodlands. And I'll ask them lots of questions about this visual. Then I ask them questions, what do you see? So they will say, probably some of them will say trees. Yes, it has many trees. Then I'll ask them, do you know what these trees are called? You never know, some of them might give you an answer. But if they don't, I will introduce the word a gum tree. I always ask the question first before telling them. For instance, I would ask them, where do animals live? In woodlands. So students would have a visual to support their answer. So they can see that there is a kookaburra and they can say it lives in a tree, or just say, or they will just say tree. Then I will reiterate in a tree. I will ask them more questions about other animals. So by using the visuals on the screen, they should be able to come up with good answers. So for instance, in a tree or on the ground. And then I will use simple structures to talk about these animals. For example, animals live in the trees and on the ground. I can ask them a simple question. Where do koalas live? Koalas live in the trees. So this is the answer I would expect from them. I would elicit more statements from my students by asking them questions. Look at these photographs. Do you know the names of these animals? And introduce the names of the animals. And then I would elicit from them a statement. Koalas live in woodlands, or parrots live in woodlands, or echidnas live in woodlands. I would go through each of the habitat with my students. So in this presentation, there is also a desert, arid zones, wetlands, rainforests, and oceans. So I would ask them a question first before introducing the information. So that might take a whole session, maybe even 2 sessions. Again, depends how long your lesson is. It will depend on your students' English language level and their age. You can finish this lesson with a game. So I've got a set of interactive games at the end. So the first game is an interactive game, Australian Habitats quiz, and this game is created on Word Wall. Students love these quizzes. Okay, so there will be a question, what is a habitat? And they need to choose the correct answer. So we can play this game either individually or as a team. So it depends. It really depends on your group. So there are 10 questions in this quiz. What is the desert like at night? So all these questions are based on the presentation. Okay, so you can finish your lesson by completing a quiz. At the end of the lesson, I would remind my students about the learning intention and success criteria. So we will go back to that slide and I will go through each success criterion and ask them a question. So did we learn the word? Did we learn what the word habitat is? Yes, we did. Tell me what the word habitat means, and they will tell me answers. So very quickly go through through each success criterion to check to make sure that we really did a good job. Then my next session can begin with a game, and this is the game that students usually love. It's called Back to the Wall. One of the students is sitting with their back to the board. Then I spin the wheel, and there will be one of the habitats. So students are not allowed to say the habitat, but they must give clues to the student so that the student guesses what this habitat is. So they might say something like, it's hot there, emus live there, and the student who is guessing the habitat should say, is it an arid zone? Another game is an Australian habitats. Another game is word search. Students love these games. So they can use iPads to complete this game, or one of the students can come up to the to the interactive board and try to find the word. So this is the game called Unjumble Sentences. Again, it's also made on Word Wall. So students need to click on the words, put them in the right order, and I can remind them that the first word would start, and I would remind them that the first word starts with a capital letter. And finally, it's a reading comprehension activity. So this one is a printed document, so you just print this out. Students will read this text 3 times. So again, I put a learning intention and success criteria. Before reading, we will revise the habitat name. So this will be front loading. So we will revise animal names, practice pronunciation of any tricky words. So first reading will be scanning. So they need to underline the animals. So these are the animals, the names of the animals in the text. So here is the text. So they underline. So for instance, koalas. So I underline koalas, parrots, and echidnas. So they read by themselves. During the second reading, they will need to match the visuals of habitats, so the photographs of habitats, with the correct paragraphs. So for instance, this is a photograph of woodlands, so they need to cut and paste in the right place. So woodlands, so it goes here. So they would read 2 times before they read with me. And by the way, depending how confident they are and depending on their level, they can check the answers with their partners first before we check the answers. So, and when we read the 3rd time, I would ask each student to read a paragraph, for instance, and I will ask them a true or false question. So true or false questions are here. So true or false questions. And students, you might want the students make their own true or false questions. So here are the answers. Another activity is a cloze activity. This one is much simpler than the interactive one. The interactive one, we completed that activity together. And this activity, they will complete by themselves. So it's sort of an assessment. Also, they can choose any habitat from our lesson and draw this habitat. And using sentence starters, they will write their own sentence about this habitat. So this is sort of a wrap up of the series of lessons. This is their independent work. So they will draw the habitat. They can also draw an animal that lives in that habitat and write sentences about it. Then they can present their work to their partner or to our group. That's how I teach Australian habitats to my ESL students. If you notice that it's not just talking to them, explaining to them, and using visuals, it's using other skills to consolidate their knowledge about Australian habitats and consolidate the vocabulary. So we talk about Australian habitats. We use lots of visuals. Students listen to me talk about Australian habitats. We then complete interactive games, read and write and draw about Australian habitats. So this idea of message abundance or message abundancy is present in my lessons. It's important that we develop all skills. We might not develop all skills in the same lesson, but to consolidate this concept, I want my students to use speaking, listening, reading, and writing skills. If you'd like to try the presentation, interactive games, and the reading comprehension activity, you can find the link in the description.